Hello and welcome to today's training. As you can see from the presentation, the topic is how morphic fields work. Let's go through the overview of today's presentation, what morphic fields are, how morphic fields function, morphic resonance, the science behind fields, and review. Without further ado, let's get straight to the first chapter, what morphic fields are. Morphic fields are structured informational fields. A morphic field is best understood not as a sound or as a frequency alone, but as a structured informational field that exists independently of any single mind or body. It is an organizing pattern. A morphic field carries instructions about form, function, and state. In nature, similar organizing fields guide how cells grow into organs, how organisms develop shape, how behavior stabilizes, and how complex systems coordinate themselves without central control. In the same way, a morphic field used for personal development carries an informational blueprint that describes a specific internal state: emotional, neurological, energetic, and behavioral. It tells your system how to organize itself. When you listen to a morphic field, your system is exposed to a coherent pattern that says, in essence, this configuration exists, this state is possible, this pattern is available. Fields offer form. A morphic field never overrides free will, identity, or biology. Instead, it works the same way nature works everywhere else, by providing a form that systems naturally align with when conditions allow. Think of it like this. Water does not force ice to melt, but when temperature changes, ice naturally reorganizes into liquid. A morphic field provides the temperature change, not the force. Your subconscious nervous system and energy field decide whether the new form is adopted, resisted, or integrated. This is why morphic fields feel subtle for some people and powerful for others. The difference is not the field. The difference is the internal system receiving it. Your system already works through fields. Habits are fields. Emotional patterns are fields. Belief systems are fields. Identity itself is a field, a stable pattern your system returns to. A morphic field functions the same language your biology already understands, through repetition, resonance, and coherence. Repetition. The subconscious learns through repetition. What your system is exposed to again and again starts to feel familiar and safe. Over time, repetition turns a new pattern into a normal internal state. Resonance. Resonance means your system naturally responds to patterns that are similar to its own. When a morphic field carries a pattern your body can recognize, your energy begins to align with it. Coherence. Coherence happens when all parts of your system move in the same direction. When thoughts, emotions, and energy is aligned, resistance drops and integration becomes easier. A morphic field provides a stable pattern that helps your system return to internal order. When you are exposed to a stable informational pattern repeatedly, your system begins to synchronize with it. Synchronization is how living systems maintain order. Your energy starts matching the field. Your subconscious begins referencing it as a viable template. Your nervous system starts adjusting towards it. And over time, your behavior and perception reorganize to match the new internal structure. This is pattern alignment. How morphic fields function. The body as the informational system. Your body, it's not just chemical or mechanical, it's informational. DNA itself is information. Genes do not create form on their own. They respond to organizing principles. Cells do not randomly assemble into organs. They follow spatial and temporal instructions. The same applies to your mind. Thoughts are information. Emotions are information. Memories are information. Identity is a long-term informational pattern stabilized by repetition. A morphic field interacts with all these layers by introducing new information into the system. Information that describes a different way of organizing experience. What happens when you listen to a field? When you listen to a morphic field, nothing dramatic needs to happen on the surface. Internally, however, several systems begin responding at once. Your nervous system detects a new pattern and adjusts its baseline. Your subconscious absorbs the repetition and begins referencing it as familiar. Your energy field starts synchronizing with a new frequency of organization. Your physiology subtle shifts to support the new state. This process is called entrainment. Entrainment means that when two systems are exposed to each other consistently, the less stable one begins to align with the more stable one. Your internal state is highly adaptive. A morphic field is highly coherent. Over time, adaptation happens naturally. Fields do not work through shock or intensity. They work through exposure over time. Just like identity is not built in a day and habits are not formed in a single decision, morphic fields integrate through gradual synchronization. Each session slightly increases familiarity. Each repetition reduces resistance. Each exposure strengthens the internal reference to new pattern. Eventually, the system stops treating the field as external information and starts treating it as part how things are. At this point, change no longer feels like effort, it feels like normalization. As your internal informational structure changes, your perception changes. You notice different things, you react differently, your emotional defaults shift, your decisions adjust, your behavior follows. Reality responds not to the field directly but to you, now organized differently. This is why morphic fields do not create results on their own. They reorganize the internal system that produces results. Your outer world shifts because the internal reference point has changed. This is how morphic fields function, quietly, structurally, and in cooperation with your biology. Morphic resonance, how fields carry memory across time. Nature repeats habits. What we call laws of nature may not be fixed rules written into reality. They behave more like habits, patterns that become stable because they have been repeated countless times before. When something happens often enough, it becomes easier for it to happen again. This is how self-organizing systems behave at every level of complexity. Morphic resonance is the principle that similar systems resonate with similar patterns from the past. How morphic resonance actually works. Every self-organizing system, a cell, an organism, brain, habit, behavior, social group, does not start from zero. It draws upon a field of prior organization. When pattern has existed before, it becomes more probable for that pattern to appear again, because the informational pathway already exists. This is what morphic resonance describes, a tendency for present systems to align with past similar systems through non-local informational influence. The past becomes background structure. Memory beyond the brain. In this framework, memory does not need to be fully stored inside physical structures. The brain does not function like a hard drive recording every experience. It functions more like a receiver, tuning into patterns that already exist in a larger informational field. This explains something fundamental: why memories can return instantly, why habits re-emerge even after long break, why learning accelerates once a pattern is familiar, why certain behaviors feel instinctive without conscious learning. The brain resonates with prior states, its own past states and the collective patterns it is embedded in. Memory is not only stored, it is accessed. Genes provide components, but components alone do not explain organization. Form, behavior, instinct, and tendency emerge from organizing fields that guide how those components are used. Through morphic resonance, organisms inherit more than DNA. They inherit patterns of organization, behavioral tendencies, and instinctive responses. This is why animals know how to behave without being taught. Complex behaviors appear suddenly in evolution. Learning something spreads faster than genetics can explain. Each individual draws from the accumulated memory of the species, and each individual contributes back to it. Inheritance becomes a two-way process. The collective memory of systems. Every time a pattern is repeated, it strengthens the field. The more often something happens, the easier it becomes for it to happen again. This applies to biological forms, nervous system responses, habits, emotional patterns, behaviors, skills, social norms, mental frameworks. Patterns become grooves in reality itself. This is why habits are so powerful. Not just physiologically, but informationally. You are not only repeating a behavior, you are reinforcing a field. You are not an isolated system. Your subconscious mind is already connected to layers of collective memory: biological, emotional, behavioral, cultural, and energetic. When you struggle with pattern, you are often resonating with something older than your personal story. And when you change pattern, you are not only changing yourself, you are subtly altering the informational field you participate in. This is why personal transformation has ripple effects. Morphic resonance and identity. Identity is not just a story you tell yourself, it is a stabilized resonance with a particular pattern of being. When you identify as I'm anxious, I'm unlucky, I always struggle, I'm creative, I'm resilient, you are tuning into a field that already exists. The longer you stay tuned, the stronger the resonance becomes. Morphic resonance explains why identity feels so real, so sticky, so self-confirming, and it explains how identity can change by returning to a different pattern and staying there long enough for it to stabilize. How morphic fields relate to morphic resonance. Morphic fields used in personal work act as intentional attractors. They present a clear, coherent pattern that your system can resonate with. Instead of unconsciously resonating with old identity fields, you are exposed to a new one. Through repetition, your system begins to treat this new pattern as familiar, not because you believe it, but because you are repeatedly exposed to it. This is how new internal habits are formed. This is how identity shifts become possible. This is how change accelerates. The deeper implication: reality is not static, it is evolutionary. Patterns build upon patterns, habits reinforce habits, fields grow stronger through repetition. You are not living inside reality, you are participating in its ongoing formation. Every pattern you repeat strengthens the field. Every pattern you interrupt weakens one. Morphic resonance is not abstract theory. It is happening constantly. The question is only this: which patterns are you resonating with, and which ones are you reinforcing? The science behind morphic fields. Reality responds to information. Morphic fields are not part of mainstream science, but they align closely with principles that modern science already uses to describe how complex systems behave. Across physics, biology, and neuroscience, one idea appears again and again. Systems organize themselves through information, coherence, and repetition. Change happens through alignment. Morphic fields operate within the same logic. Coherence creates order. At the most fundamental level, reality is not solid matter. It is energy structured by information. In quantum systems, coherence determines stability. When parts of a system are synchronized, the system becomes ordered. When coherence collapses, chaos increases. A morphic field can be understood as a coherent informational pattern. When your system is exposed to it, your internal state begins to synchronize. Energy responds to information. The body responds to energetic patterns. The subconscious responds to emotional signatures. This is why the process feels natural. Nothing is pushed. Your system is simply aligning with a more coherent state. The sequence always follows the same path. New information, new energy, new perception, new behavior, new reality. Brain learns through repetition. The brain is not changed by ideas, but experience. Neuroplasticity shows that neural pathways strengthen through repetition, emotional intensity, visualization, energetic and sensory states. Morphic fields continuously expose the nervous system and brain to a specific internal state. Over time, this repeated exposure reshapes neural activity. Old patterns weaken, new pathways stabilize. This is why changes created with fields do not feel artificial. They feel like a gradual return to balance. The brain does not ask if something is true. It asks if it's repeated often enough to be trusted. Informational fields, organization without central control. Modern science increasingly recognizes that complex systems are guided by fields rather than instructions stored in a single location. Cells organize themselves without a central controller. Flocks move as one without a leader. Brains coordinate billions of neurons without a master command. This is because organization emerges from fields of information. Morphic field operates in the same way. It does not tell the system what to do. It provides a structure, that the system naturally organizes around. Once the structure is present, behavior follows. Your energy field functions like a continuous broadcast. It reflects your emotional baseline, your identity, your expectations, your internal state. Reality responds to this broadcast. Morphic fields alter the broadcast by introducing a new energetic template. As your system entrains into it, the signal you emit changes. People respond differently, situations unfold differently, opportunities appear where they didn't before. The key insight: morphic fields do not break the laws of nature, they operate through them. Coherence instead of force, repetition instead of command, information instead of control. This is why they feel subtle and why over time they can be profound. Review of today's presentation. Morphic fields are informational blueprints. They function through energetic entrainment. They interact with subconscious and energy. Meditation increases receptivity. Results depend on internal state. Identity shift makes the changes permanent. Scientific principles support morphic field theory. Thanks for watching the video. If you are interested, check out my second channel, Filip Morphic Fields, and see you at the next video.